Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take a whole heap of information, articles, research, all those notes, and we really try to dig out the most valuable insights just for you. Today, we're embarking on a proper deep dive into something incredibly powerful. It impacts all of us, but often you just don't see it. We're talking about your mindset. It's like this silent conductor running your inner world, quietly shaping how you think, how you learn, how you handle setbacks, and ultimately how you succeed. And look, it's not just some feel-good buzzword you see slapped on a poster. It's a really profound psychological framework. It fundamentally shapes how you see the world and your place in it. So our mission today, to unpack this powerful, often underestimated force. We're drawing on some really deep, practical insights from the sources you've given us. Okay, let's unpack this.
Exactly. And that's really the crucial point, isn't it? I mean, sure, the word mindset is everywhere now. It's in the popular vocabulary. But its true significance, well, that lies in its role as this foundational psychological thing that underpins so much of how we interact with reality, how we grow personally. And a lot of what we'll dig into today, it's rooted in the really pioneering research of Dr. Carol Dweck. She's a Stanford psychologist whose work honestly brought this whole concept into sharp focus, gave it a real scientific backbone. So think of this as your guided tour through mindset. We'll kick off by clearly defining the different types, then dive into the, frankly, surprising neuroscience that shows how your brain is actually built for growth. We'll also explore how you can reframe failure not as, hitting a brick wall, but as getting crucial data. And then, maybe most importantly, give you some practical, actionable ways to cultivate that growth approach in your own life.
That sounds absolutely vital. Because understanding mindset, it really goes beyond just knowing a definition, doesn't it? But let's start there anyway. Let's really get into Dr. Carol Dweck's groundbreaking ideas. Now, many of you listening might already know this, but Dweck's work brilliantly separates out two main types of mindset. And getting your head around this difference, that's really the first step to harnessing its power. Okay, first up, we have what Dweck calls the fixed mindset. Just imagine someone, right, who genuinely believes their basic abilities like intelligence or talent, even creativity, are essentially fixed traits, static, unchangeable. They see them as innate things set in stone pretty much from birth. You either have a certain amount of smarts or you don't. You're born autistic or you're not. It's like you get a fixed quota of ability and that's it. Not much room to change or get better through effort. You hear it all the time, right? Oh, I'm just not a math person. As if being good at math is some genetic lottery they lost instead of, a skill you can practice and actually improve. Or maybe I was born totally without artistic talent, implying that skill with, say, a paintbrush or an instrument is just handed out to a chosen few, not something built through years of hard work and, crucially, effective strategies. So for someone operating from this fixed mindset, hitting a snag, facing a challenge, it often feels like a direct hit on their inherent capability, like a personal failure. And that often leads to that painful thought, well, more effort is pointless because this is just who I am. It becomes this self-limiting thing, discouraging risks, discouraging perseverance. Now, in really stark contrast to that, we have the growth mindset. And this is a profoundly different view. It champions the belief that those exact same traits, intelligence, talent, creativity, pretty much most human abilities, they aren't fixed at all. They're dynamic. They can be developed, nurtured, significantly boosted through sustained effort by using smart learning methods and by actively seeking out help, feedback, guidance from others. This perspective sees ability more like a muscle, something that gets stronger, more capable, more refined with consistent training, deliberate practice. It's not some predetermined genetic lottery ticket. So someone embodying a growth mindset faced with that tough math problem, they wouldn't just say, I can't do this.
Yeah.
Instead, they might think or even say out loud, okay, I'm finding this tricky right now, but, with more practice, maybe a different approach or getting a bit of help, I can definitely understand this. I can get better. They see learning, growing, developing as this continuous, open-ended journey, truly limitless in a way. And this fundamental difference in belief, it creates totally different responses to struggle, to opportunity. And here's where it gets really interesting.
It absolutely does. Because Dr. Dweck's work, it's so much more than just, another theory in a journal. Its implications are incredibly profound. They touch almost everything: education, career development, even your personal relationships. And the core reason these two mindsets lead to such dramatically different results, it boils down to their fundamental approach to challenges, to setbacks, to the whole act of learning itself. Think about someone operating mainly with that fixed mindset. They'll often actively avoid challenges. Why? Because they see them as potential threats to their sort of fragile sense of intelligence or talent. If they succeed easily, great. That just confirms their belief in their innate ability. Feels good, short term, but if they struggle, even a little bit, oof, that can feel like proof of their inadequacy. So they might give up quickly or, carefully avoid similar tasks down the line. Their self-perception is always kind of on guard duty, needing protection from anything that might show a perceived weakness. This often leads to just playing it safe, sticking to what they already know they're good at, shying away from anywhere they might look less than perfect, right? Whereas individuals with a growth mindset, they actually embrace challenges. They don't run from difficulties. Sometimes they even seek them out. They see them not as threats, but as these invaluable chances to learn, to expand what they can do, to genuinely stretch themselves. They seem to intuitively get that the process of struggling, of grappling with something hard, that's precisely where the real deep growth actually happens.
Yeah.
And Dweck's longitudinal studies, where she watched students over long periods, they show this difference in action so clearly. She found this consistent pattern. Students who were taught about and then adopted a growth mindset, this idea that their intelligence could grow, they consistently showed improvement in their grades over time. Consistently. Why? Well, because they didn't see setbacks as personal failings. They saw them as temporary hurdles to get over, solvable problems. So they'd persist longer, they'd switch up their learning strategies if one wasn't working, they'd actively look for help and feedback when they needed it. They treated every challenge, every mistake, as a stepping stone towards getting better.
And the flip side, the students stuck in that fixed mindset.
Exactly. Conversely, students operating mostly with a fixed mindset, they either plateaued pretty quickly, or worse, they just gave up entirely after hitting a failure. And the psychological mechanism behind that stagnation is, well, it's subtle but powerful. For them, struggling or failing meant they just weren't smart enough or talented enough. They didn't have it. So to protect that vulnerable self-image, to avoid that really painful feeling of inadequacy, they disengage. They'd avoid future tasks where they might fail again, or maybe even just dismiss the importance of the task altogether. That wasn't important anyway. What's truly fascinating here is how these seemingly simple, deeply held beliefs can send you down such different paths in the real world. Think about it for yourself. If you, say, as a student, believe you can get smarter, you're just exponentially more likely to put in extra study time, try new learning techniques, push through tough assignments. But if you implicitly believe you can't, you might just shrug, check out, and say, well, that's just me, resigning yourself to whatever limits you currently perceive. And this isn't just about grades, obviously. It applies everywhere. Tackling a complex new skill at work, starting a fitness plan, learning guitar, navigating a tricky relationship. Your underlying mindset will fundamentally shape your approach, your resilience, and where you ultimately end up. If you believe your capacity to understand or adapt or connect is fixed, you'll hit a wall much faster, much harder than if you genuinely believe those capacities can be cultivated, strengthened, improved over time. This difference in belief, it creates entirely different responses, which then compound over months, years, into wildly different outcomes in life.
That's such a critical point. It's not just psychology floating around in your head. It's about how you literally interact with and even kind of create your reality. And what makes this even more compelling is that it's not just a psychological framework. It's not just thoughts and beliefs. It actually has a very real physical, biological basis. So let's shift gears a bit now from the psychological angle to the biological reality that's actually happening inside your own head. It's time we challenge that really common but fundamentally wrong idea many of us grew up with, the notion that your brain is like a fixed machine, a static organ. For ages, the prevailing scientific view is sort of, once you hit early adulthood, your brain was pretty much wired up. Connection set, not much capacity for big changes, but modern neuroscience has completely blown that idea out of the water. We now understand this incredible concept, neuroplasticity. It's the brain's amazing lifelong ability to constantly rewire itself, reorganize, adapt based on new experiences, learning, challenges. And this isn't just some neat science fact, it's a core fundamental pillar that absolutely supports the very essence of a growth mindset. Your brain is literally built to grow.
It really is. Neuroplasticity is arguably one of the most empowering discoveries in neuroscience. It gives us the biological how behind the growth mindset. In simple terms, it means your brain isn't rigid like a computer chip. It's dynamic, always evolving, more like a living, adaptable landscape. Every single time you push yourself out of your comfort zone, maybe learning a complex new language, trying to master a difficult piece of music, grappling with a tough emotional situation, even just figuring out complex new software, your brain is actively creating and strengthening new neural pathways. Think of it like this, maybe a more detailed version of that path analogy. Imagine a really dense forest, no trails. When you first try to walk through, you're forging a new path, right? Pushing through bushes. It's faint, barely visible. It's like a new neural pathway forming between neurons. Now, the more you walk that path, the more you practice that skill, confront that challenge, engage with that new info, the clearer that trail becomes. Wider, more efficient, and over time, with enough persistence, enough consistent practice, that faint, difficult trail, it turns into a well-trodden, high-speed highway of neural connections. Really efficient.
So effort isn't just about willpower then.
Yes, exactly. This deep understanding shows that effort isn't just some abstract virtue we talk about in speeches. It's a tangible, physical, biological process happening inside your brain. Your effort, your persistence, your willingness to try again after hitting a wall, it's not just mental grit. It literally translates into measurable changes in your brain's physical structure and its function. Down at the cellular level, this involves things like strengthening synaptic connections, the whole neurons that fire together, wire together idea. And even changes in myelin, that fatty stuff insulating pathways, making signals travel faster, more efficiently. So this science profoundly validates the core idea of the growth mindset. Your brain is inherently designed to grow, adapt, build capacity directly in response to the effort and challenges you take on. It's an active, ongoing process where you, through your consistent effort, are quite literally the architect of your own cognitive landscape. You're shaping its pathways, its capabilities. And this raises a really important question for you personally. If your brain is designed to grow through effort, through challenge, what opportunities might you be leaving on the table just because you haven't pushed yourself to forge those new pathways yet? What new skills, what deeper understanding, what expanded capacities are just waiting to be built inside you, maybe just beyond what you currently think is possible?
Wow. That's a really powerful thought to just sit with for a moment. It genuinely makes you rethink how you approach difficulty, how you frame those inevitable challenges. And nowhere is that reframing more powerful than in how a growth mindset completely reimagines, well, failure, one of life's most common and often most feared experiences. For so many, failure feels like a dead end, a final verdict, an undeniable statement about their limits. But for those operating with a growth mindset, failure becomes something totally different, something incredibly valuable. It's not a verdict anymore. It becomes feedback, not a final judgment, just information. The classic example, the one that always jumps out when talking about this, is, of course, Thomas Edison and his massive quest for a practical light bulb. We all kind of know the story. He didn't just try a few times and strike gold. Accounts vary, but they all point to staggering numbers over 1,000, maybe even 10,000 failed attempts before he found a filament that actually worked well. And when a reporter famously asked him about all these failures, Edison didn't complain or get frustrated. He gave one of the most profound statements ever on resilience. I didn't fail. I just found 1,000 ways that won't work. Think about that. From a logical, scientific, even engineering standpoint, each so-called failed experiment wasn't a failure at all. Each attempt, whether the material burned out too fast, didn't conduct electricity well, wasn't strong enough, it gave him valuable information, more data points. Each try systematically narrowed down the possibilities, moving him, step by step, closer to the solution. This iterative process, that's exactly how good science works. It's how engineers design things, and it's precisely how your brain learns. If every failure is just more data, why would you fear it? Why wouldn't you want more data?
You've absolutely nailed such a critical insight there. Edison's quote is a masterclass in applying that growth mindset to real-world innovation. It's almost like the scientific method personified. Each failure wasn't a dead end for him. It was essentially a controlled experiment. He wasn't just randomly trying stuff. He was systematically testing ideas, observing outcomes, and then adjusting his next try based on the specific data he got back. Filament burned out too quick. Okay, that's crucial data for the next choice. Didn't conduct enough current. Another vital piece of info. And this iterative process, trial and error, getting feedback, learning from what didn't work, then adjusting, that's fundamentally how the brain learns and adapts too. Your brain doesn't learn by getting everything right first time. Actually, it learns most effectively by making mistakes, getting that sensory or cognitive input, which is feedback, and then updating its internal models, strengthening or weakening pathways to do better next time.
So the fear of failure actually holds us back from learning.
Massively. The psychological implications of adopting Edison's perspective are truly transformative. When you fundamentally reframe failure as just feedback, that paralyzing fear of it tends to just diminish significantly. If a misstep isn't a judgment on your worth or your intelligence, but simply valuable, actionable information about what didn't work this time, then that huge emotional weight associated with failing just lifts. And this reduction in fear allows for much more sustained effort, encourages deeper exploration. Instead of giving up early to avoid feeling inadequate or embarrassed, you actually become curious. You naturally start asking, okay, what did I learn from that? What insights did I gain? What can I do differently next time? This proactive analytical stance fosters this continuous cycle of improvement rather than getting stuck or retreating. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you can see how this perspective fundamentally shifts your whole relationship with risk, with innovation, with progress in any field. Whether you're a startup founder tweaking a product, a scientist on a complex problem, an artist refining their craft, or just trying to communicate better in a relationship.
Viewing setbacks as data points, not personal defeats, is absolutely key for sustained progress. It lets you keep experimenting, push boundaries, fail forward, and ultimately learn your way to a solution that might have otherwise stayed out of reach. So maybe ask yourself this: how might this simple but really profound mental shift change your approach to the next big challenge or setback you face?
That idea alone, reframing failure as just data, another piece of info, that could be totally revolutionary for anyone, really. And what's really cool is how this deep internal shift in mindset then translates directly into things you can see your external behaviors. Specifically, your daily habits. Your habits aren't just random routines you fell into. They are, in fact, incredibly powerful reflections of your underlying mindset, the beliefs you hold about yourself and what you're capable of. Think about it. Do you often find yourself avoiding difficult tasks, putting them off because they feel too hard, or you doubt you can do them well? That right there is often a classic sign of a fixed mindset sneaking in. You're subconsciously protecting yourself from the perceived threat of failure, or maybe just the sheer effort involved. But on the other hand, do you find yourself actively embracing challenges? Maybe even seeking them out? Do you genuinely enjoy the process of learning, struggling a bit, and then overcoming obstacles? Well, that's a strong, visible indicator of a growth mindset actively at work within you. Now, to effectively bridge that gap, between the internal mindset shift and consistent external action, there's a really powerful technique from James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. He calls it identity-based habits. And this isn't just about setting a goal like, I want to run a marathon. It's about fundamentally changing how you see yourself, your internal identity, to match that goal. So instead of just saying, for example, I want to run every day, which focuses only on the outcome you make, this subtle but incredibly powerful shift, you start telling yourself and really believing, I am a runner. It might sound like just changing a word, a tiny tweak in phrasing. The psychological impact on your motivation, your consistency, it's huge. It changes everything.
It really is a profound shift, moving from doing to being. And its effectiveness comes from how it fundamentally changes your core motivation and commitment. When you say, I want to run every day, your focus is mainly on an external action. And that action usually needs a fair bit of willpower, discipline, maybe brute force motivation to get going and keep going, especially on off days. It's a task you feel you should do. But when you declare inside and out, I am a runner, you're changing your self-perception, your identity, at a really deep level. Running stops being just something you do. It becomes part of who you are, intrinsic, inseparable. And this new internal identity then naturally starts driving your actions. A runner runs because, well, that's what runners do. It's consistent with their self-image, their internal blueprint. It stops being about forcing yourself to do a task and becomes more about affirming who you see yourself as being.
So it makes consistency easier, less of a fight.
Yes, exactly. This identity shift is incredibly powerful for building genuine, long-term consistency. When an action aligns smoothly with your identity, it stops being this constant battle of willpower versus resistance. Instead, it just becomes an affirmation of who you are, a natural expression of yourself. If you identify as a runner, skipping a run starts to feel, well, out of character, inconsistent with who you are now. And paradoxically, that makes it harder not to run than to actually go for the run. If you identify as a learner, taking on a complex new topic or diving into research becomes less of a chore and more of just a natural inclination, something you just do. This method cleverly bypasses a lot of the usual resistance and procrastination we feel when trying to adopt new habits. It creates this self-reinforcing loop. You act in line with your desired, growth-oriented identity. Those positive actions then strengthen and reinforce that identity. And that stronger identity makes it even easier, more natural to keep doing those actions. This is how you don't just do things with a growth mindset. You actually become a person who embodies it. So think about an area in your life where you want to develop, where you want consistency. Instead of just focusing on what you want to do, maybe pause and consider. Who do you want to be in relation to that goal? How might that identity shift unlock more consistency, more commitment for you?
That is a genuine game changer for building lasting habits.
Yeah.
Absolutely redefines the whole struggle. And just to really drive home how impactful these principles are, how they actually play out in the real world, the messy, challenging, sometimes triumphant reality of life, Let's look beyond the theory for a moment. Let's look at some really compelling real-life examples. And these aren't just, motivational fairy tales or lucky breaks. They are logical, consistent applications of a deeply embedded growth mindset showing up powerfully in the lives of people you definitely know. Okay, first, let's talk about Michael Jordan, the basketball legend. Widely seen as the greatest ever. We usually remember the highlights, right? The championships, the dunks, the clutch shots. But what's maybe less known or less emphasized is that he was famously cut from his high school varsity team as a sophomore. Think about that. The guy who became the absolute epitome of basketball excellence was initially told he wasn't good enough. At a really formative stage, for many people, that would have been crushing, a definitive judgment, a sign to maybe try something else. But it wasn't a dead end for Jordan. That perceived failure, that rejection, it didn't make him conclude, okay, guess I'm not meant for this. Talent's not there. No. His growth mindset wouldn't allow that kind of final limiting thought. It actually fueled his fire. It pushed him to train harder, dedicate himself more intensely, work on his weaknesses, hone his strengths more meticulously than anyone else. He'd show up early for practice, stay late, pushing himself to the absolute limit. He saw getting cut not as a final verdict, but as powerful feedback information telling him he needed to work harder, refine his game, literally build the skills needed to become legendary. And, well, the rest is history. Then there's J.K. Rowling, the brilliant creator of the Harry Potter universe, a global phenomenon. Before she became one of the most successful authors ever, completely changing children's literature, she faced a staggering amount of rejection. Her first manuscript, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, was turned down by no less than 12 different publishers. 12! Just imagine the emotional toll of that constant stream of no's for an aspiring writer, someone with a fixed mindset. Those rejections likely would have felt like undeniable proof of inadequacy, confirmation that their writing talent just wasn't there or the story wasn't good enough. But Rowling kept going. Her unwavering commitment to her story, her belief in its worth, her quiet confidence that she could find an audience eventually that pushed her through setback after setback. Each rejection was just a closed door, not a final word on her potential. She kept refining, kept believing until that 13th publisher finally said yes and ignited a literary revolution. And finally, let's look at Elon Musk. His journey with companies like SpaceX and Tesla is, objectively, filled with what many people, especially early on, would have called spectacular failures. Remember those early SpaceX rockets exploding, not just once, multiple times? The ideas that were mocked, Tesla nearly going bankrupt, the huge amounts of money burned through chasing these incredibly ambitious visions. He's faced massive public criticism, constant skepticism, seemingly impossible technical and financial hurdles, yet he consistently, almost stubbornly, keeps pushing forward, driven by this unwavering, almost audacious commitment to his long-term vision for humanity. He seems to view these setbacks, the explosions, the criticism, not as personal failures or signs of flaws, but as essential learning experiences, crucial steps in a massive, complex problem-solving process. He really embodies that idea that you learn most powerfully, not when things go perfectly, but when they go wrong, and you have to innovate your way out.
These individuals really are perfect embodiments of the principles we've been digging into. Not just as inspiring stories, but as logical, predictable outcomes of thinking and acting in a certain way. For Michael Jordan, getting cut wasn't proof of no talent. It was, as you said, perfectly powerful feedback, pinpointing exactly where he needed to grow. His response: intensified strategic effort, deliberate practice. This directly helped build and strengthen those neural pathways we talked about, neuroplasticity in action. He literally grew his skills, his brain's capacity for basketball, using that early failure as data to guide his relentless training. And J.K. Rowling's story powerfully shows the importance of perseverance, especially when external validation keeps getting denied. Each rejection could have been seen through a fixed mindset lens as proof she wasn't a good writer or the story didn't have it. Instead, her persistence, setting it out again and again, her continued belief in the story, strongly suggests that underlying growth mindset, an implicit belief that her storytelling ability could be honed, that success was possible through effort, refinement, finding the right fit. She wasn't just proving existing talent, she was actively building it. One rejection, one revision, one belief at a time. And Elon Musk's journey. It's arguably one of the most potent modern examples of embracing huge challenges and seeing massive setbacks as just data points on an almost unprecedented scale. His willingness to push on, launch after launch, despite exploding rockets and mocked ideas, reflects that deep growth mindset. He operates from a conviction that engineering problems, design flaws, market resistance, even scientific hurdles are all solvable. He embodies the belief that talent in innovation, engineering, execution isn't static. It can be built, refined, expanded through relentless effort, learning from mistakes, adapting strategies based on feedback. He perfectly embodies that being aspect of identity we talk about, becoming the person who pushes boundaries, who learns and rebuilds from every stumble, every failure.
So it's not just about them being born geniuses then.
Exactly. These aren't just extraordinary individuals born with some unique genius the rest of us can't access. Yes, they have innate capabilities, of course. But their huge successes are, in large part, a direct, logical result of applying a growth mindset consistently, day by day, over long stretches. They didn't just luck into greatness or magically get talent. They consistently applied the idea that abilities can be developed, that failure is just information, and that persistence, guided by learning, is the real path. It reinforces this core idea. True success isn't about being born with all the talent you need. It's about cultivating the powerful belief that talent itself can be built, nurtured, expanded throughout your life, limited really only by your willingness to learn and adapt.
That's such an empowering thought. If these icons operate this way, what does that mean for you listening right now? It means you have immense power. It means the blueprints for your future aren't set in stone. You are drawing them right now with every choice you make about how you respond to challenges. So how can you, starting today, begin cultivating your own growth mindset? How can you actively apply these ideas? We've got some direct, really actionable steps for you drawn from everything we've discussed. Okay, the first one, and maybe the most impactful. Consciously change your inner language. This is about actively catching yourself when that negative, fixed mindset voice starts whispering doubts. When you find yourself thinking or about to say, I can't do this, immediately, deliberately add one powerful little word. Say, I can't do this yet. That tiny addition completely reframes the challenge. It goes from being this insurmountable wall to just a temporary hurdle. It tells your brain and you this is a current limitation, not a permanent one. Something solvable with time, effort, the right approach. Second, make a real conscious effort to focus on learning, not proving. Shift your motivation away from trying to show others or yourself how smart or talented you already are towards a genuine curiosity about gaining new knowledge, developing new skills. When learning is the goal, mistakes become information, not failures. Third, and this is so crucial, start actively celebrating effort over outcomes. In our results-obsessed world, it's easy to only give props when a goal is hit. But the real growth, that happens in the struggle, the consistent effort, the attempts, even when they don't immediately succeed. Recognize, appreciate, reward yourself for the persistence, the hard work, the resilience, regardless of the immediate result. That reinforces the process. Fourth, make a deliberate choice. Be curious about failure instead of fearing it. When things don't go to plan, when you stumble, don't shy away. Lean into it. Ask analytical questions. Okay, what happened here? What did I learn? What insights came from this? What can I do differently next time? Turn that initial disappointment into an objective investigation. And finally, surround yourself with growth-minded people. The people you spend time with, your social circle, they have a massive, often underestimated influence on your own outlook, your beliefs. Actively seek out people who embrace challenges, who talk openly about learning from mistakes, who celebrate the process of getting better. Their mindset can be infectious in a really good way, pulling you in a positive direction.
And these aren't just, nice little suggestions. Each one has a deep, evidence-based psychological reason behind it that directly supports rewiring your brain and changing your thinking patterns. Let's quickly break down why they work so well. When you change your inner language by adding yet, you're directly challenging that feeling of finality and a fixed mindset. I can't do this is a closed door, but I can't do this yet. That's a statement of potential, of process, a door that's just paused, not locked. It instantly reframes perceived inability into a temporary state, a challenge that can be overcome. This subtle shift fosters possibility, aligns your inner talk with neuroplasticity. Your brain literally hears yet and understands, okay, learning pathways still open, new connections can form, progress is expected. It primes you for problem solving, not resignation.
Okay, that makes sense. What about focusing on learning versus proving?
Right. Shifting focus from proving to learning is critical because it changes your relationship with performance. When your main drive is to prove how smart you are, anxiety tends to go way up. You worry about judgment, about mistakes, exposing inadequacy. This fear stifles exploration, risk-taking. You play it safe. But when your focus is purely on learning, acquiring knowledge, mistakes become way less scary. They turn into valuable info, clues for what to do next. This reduces performance anxiety, encourages you to tackle new things without that pressure of needing immediate perfection. It feeds genuine curiosity. And celebrating effort over outcomes, that's powerful because it reinforces the process of growth. In a world obsessed with results, wins, losses, it's easy to overlook the grit, the dedication, the hard work that actually leads to those results. By acknowledging and celebrating the effort itself, the hours put in, pushing through difficulty, trying again after a setback, regardless of the immediate outcome, You make striving intrinsically rewarding. You foster a love of the process, reinforcing the very behaviors that lead to growth and persistence. Makes them feel good, not like a chore. Builds that internal drive.
And the curiosity about failure.
Being genuinely curious about failure leverages that whole failure as feedback idea. When you approach a setback with curiosity, you transform a potentially negative emotional hit into a chance for objective analysis and learning. Instead of self-blame or seeing it as a personal defect, you activate your problem-solving brain. You ask, what data did this give me? What variables did I miss? How can I refine my approach based on this? This turns every misstep into a stepping stone toward understanding and success. And finally, surrounding yourself with growth-minded people taps into social psychology, the power of your environment. Mindsets can be contagious. When you're consistently around people who embrace challenges, learn from mistakes, celebrate development, it creates this powerful reinforcing loop for your own growth mindset. They become role models, a support system that normalizes effort, resilience, belief, and improvement. Makes it much easier for you to adopt and maintain those patterns yourself. So this really brings up an important question for you listening now to think about. Which of these small but really powerful actionable shifts can you commit to practicing, maybe starting today, to begin actively rewiring your own default thinking and unlocking more of your potential? The power to start is right there within you.
What a fantastic, truly practical toolkit to take away. This deep dive has really shown, hasn't it, that your mindset, even though you can't see it, has this profound, tangible impact. It shows up every single day. In your actions, your resilience when things get tough, and ultimately, your capacity for learning and achieving lasting success. And it's so important to remember, cultivating a growth mindset isn't about just being positive all the time or, blindly optimistic when things are genuinely hard. Not at all. It's about being logical, being realistic about challenges, and crucially, being willing to adapt, learn, and grow through those challenges. The core message woven through everything we looked at is this. Real success isn't about being born with a fixed lump of talent. It's fundamentally about the powerful belief that talent itself can be built, cultivated, expanded, refined through dedication, smart learning, and just plain persistence. We really hope this deep dive has not only given you information, but has genuinely made you think differently. Maybe even challenged you a bit about your own capabilities and how you choose to face what's ahead.
And if we just take that thought one step further, if we really consider the scientific truth that your brain is always listening, always adapting to your core beliefs, soaking up your inner dialogue and physically changing based on it, then the really profound implication is that your internal narrative, it isn't just some story you tell yourself passively. It's way more than that. Your internal narrative is essentially a living blueprint for your future capabilities. Every time you think or say internally or out loud, I can't, or I'm not good enough, you are literally sketching limits onto that blueprint, drawing hard boundaries, defining what's impossible. But every single time you consciously grab onto that powerful word yet, or choose curiosity over fear when facing a challenge, or decide to see a failure as just feedback, you're actively expanding the potential on that blueprint, erasing limits, designing new limitless possibilities. So the ultimate, most empowering question for you, our listener, to really sit with is this. What kind of blueprint are you consciously or maybe unconsciously drawing for yourself today? What expanded capabilities, what new horizons, what limitless potential are you actively designing into your future self right now? The incredible power to change that design, to redraw those lines, it is truly unequivocally within your hands.